Well, hello, friends and fellow pioneers. I have the pleasure of having Karen Morris back to talk to us about her book. Now, I have a copy this time called A Year Without the Grocery Store, a step by step guide to acquiring, organizing, and cooking food storage. So, I wanted to let y'all know it was about 9 months ago that we did the first interview, and Karen has some updates to share with us. So if you're watching and feel in any way tempted to jump off, I want to tell you hang on, because at the end, Karen's going to share a unique part of their journey, something that's happened that's new since we last talked. And, I just wanted you to know we're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about some resources and uh, preparedness in relationship to food and food storage. But again, I want to just, if you've thought about upgrading to buy your own property or bigger property, that kind of thing, there's a story, a testimony that Karen's going to share about something that happened in their family. So stay tuned until the end to hear the full story. Thank you again, Karen, for joining us. And for those of you who didn't get to watch the first interview, would you just tell us real briefly, how did you become an author of a book about food storage and preparedness? What got you here?
So, a very long time ago, I would say probably 12 to 15 years ago, I got into couponing of all things, and I got really good at couponing. I never extreme couponed, but I got enough for my family, and that was when I was first involved. I started teaching people get enough for your family. One coupon for each member of your family plus one to donate. And that's where I started. But then after that, I had a whole storage room full of food. And it got me to thinking, well, if something ever happened and my family needed to eat food, we would be okay for a while. But what other kinds of things do I need to take care of my family if something would happen? And so that's where our preparedness journey really started. From there, having a room full of food, I was like, okay, I need a way to filter water, and I need a way to be able to can the food, can food that I might grow. So we got a Berkey water filter, and we got an All American pressure canner. Those were my next two big purchases. From there, we started gardening a little bit in the yard that we had. At that point, we had 0.17 acres in the middle of Ferguson, Missouri. So we didn't have a whole lot of room, but we did what we could. We grew peas, we grew carrots, we grew herbs, and we started learning a whole lot and started looking for a homestead at that point. And it's interesting because that being probably 8 to 10 years ago that we started thinking about homesteading and looking for a homestead. It took us 8 to 10 years before we actually got our homestead. But the thing that originally got me started with everything was just couponing. And I learned that I could feed my family on a whole lot less money than I had been. And that got me to thinking about what else do we need? And so that's where we started. And we learned a whole lot about cooking from scratch after that. We learned a whole lot about natural health after that. We learned a whole lot about how to take care of ourselves, both our bodies, both about how to feed ourselves with whole foods. And that really got us prepared for the journey that the Lord was going to have us take. And because I had learned to cook everything from scratch, because I had learned how to store food properly, because I had learned how to create a menu, and not just an everyday menu, but a preparedness menu. And when I learned all of those things, then I started helping other people do those same things. And that's actually what led to A Year Without the Grocery Store, which is the same book that Aurora has with her today as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I do want to let people know that we're going to be talking about not just the book, but there's an extra resource that Karen wrote. It's the
It's a companion.
companion workbook.
Yep.
So tell us about, so you shared with us your journey of how you got into this. Uh, how did you go from having the content and the stories and the information to write in this book to actually publishing? Tell us about that journey, and what made this book be a reality. Tell us more about how this baby was born.
So that is a really interesting story. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Money Saving Mom. Her name is Crystal Payne. She is not only the one who got me introduced to couponing so many years ago, but she is also the one I went and watched a podcast done that she collaborated with for writing a book. And I the course was expensive, but I thought, you know what? That's something that I could do. I know a little bit about a couple of different things. I betcha I could write a book. And so I purchased the course and I walked through it. I did everything it told me to do. I followed the steps it told me to take. And after about, I'm going to say it took me about 6 to 9 months, but that was the writing, that was the personal editing, that was, you always read your book out loud to yourself to make sure everything sounds right, because you'll catch things that you don't realize that sound off. I then you send it off to an editor. You when you're self-publishing, then you have to find somebody to do your cover for you. You have to find somebody to format it for you. You have to. There's all of these different steps that you have to take in order for your book to become to go from an idea on the page to a physical book that you can hold in your hand. So I think the course really helped me work through that. It gave me concrete steps I needed to take in order to do that, but it also inspired me that it could be done. And it was something that, everybody has in the back of their mind, oh, I could write a book. And the interesting thing is, A Year Without the Grocery Store is actually my second book that I have written. I wrote a book on couponing, of all things, probably I'd say 6 or 7 years before I wrote A Year Without the Grocery Store. So, but I wrote that book. I didn't know anything about what I was doing. Yes, it was written. Yes, it was edited. Yes, I had somewhat of a cover. It did not look incredibly professional, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to market it. I didn't know how to get it out there. And I don't think it ever sold a single copy on Amazon. It's still there. And I don't think it sold a single copy on Amazon. But that first experience that I had in failing, but having actually taken the time to do it and to work through it and to figure it all out helped. But then when I had a class that actually walked me through it and how to do it and how then to publicize it and how to get the name out and how to do all of these different things in order for your book to do well, that was what really, really helped. And Aurora had asked me to share that right now on Amazon, as of yesterday, the last time I looked, my paperback book, so this book right here, is ranked 10,451 out of all of Amazon's paperback books. And I mean, that might sound very insignificant. It's 10,000th, right? However, I went and looked up how many paperback books are on Amazon, and the figure that I found was 29.3 million. So when you consider that this book is now 10,451st, this book is in the top 0.4% of all books on Amazon. So I would tell you that the course that I took was well worth the money. And now I've got that information for the rest of my life. And currently, I've got the book, I've got the workbook. I am currently about halfway through writing my third book with plans for a fourth and a fifth here coming real soon too. So it was definitely worth the money and worth the learning to dig into how to actually make a book go from just ideas in your head to words on a page and then to something that actually sells.
That's awesome. And really taking action, we have to have that time when we're practicing.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that we accomplish, there always was like a rough draft or a failed idea or an idea that didn't take off. I'm not going to say a failed idea. So,
Right.
one of the things that I wanted to ask you was, Like, what's the most impactful feedback or story that you have heard back from your readers after purchasing the book? You know, and people are in all walks of life that are purchasing the book. But tell us, like, just the most impactful, awesome transformation that someone has had after getting a year without the grocery store.
So, about, I'm going to guess about 6 months ago, I got an email from a reader through my website. And she has asked me not to use her name. So she calls herself Texas Gal. Um, she wrote me and said, Karen, you need to know what kind of an impact you've made on my life. Um, I found your book at the beginning of the pandemic. I read your book and I started doing the things in your book. And then once I got through your book, I went to your blog and I found all the information on your blog and I started following your advice on your blog. And she said that it made such a difference in her life. Now, she lives in Texas. And earlier this year, in February, I believe, Texas had a very, very hard freeze, like they don't have hardly ever. And it was after that hard freeze that she contacted me because she's like, you need to realize that because of your book, I not only had food, I had a way to cook food. I had water. I had a way to heat water. I had a way to keep my family warm. I had a way to make, we had stuff to do because I made sure that I had taken into consideration the fact that my family would need activities to do, even though we didn't have electricity. I had plenty of light. And so all of these things, she walked me through everything that she had done, all of the steps that she had taken. And it all came down to the fact because she started by reading my book. So, it's easy to take and read something, but then to take that information and to actually use it and for it to change the way that you live is a huge, huge thing. And I want to just give her kudos because the steps that she took, she didn't do anything out of the ordinary. She didn't do anything that was hard for that one thing. But all of those things, doing it one step and then the next step and then the next step, it made a huge difference in her own family's life when they had a crisis that they didn't expect. So it started with the crisis of the pandemic and not being able to get enough toilet paper. And she had even said back at the very beginning, her husband, she doesn't go do what everybody else does because everybody else is doing it. She doesn't work that way. But her husband looked at her and said, maybe we should go get a little bit more toilet paper. Maybe we should get a little bit more food. And she was very reluctant to do that. But then after having found the book, after having seen the resources, after having realized how easy and simple it is if you just take the steps, it changed the way that her family lived through that period where they didn't have electricity, they didn't have heat while it was freezing. So they didn't have light, they didn't have a way to cook food, but she was able to take care of all of those things by herself just because she had followed the steps that we have in the book and on the blog. So that made a huge impact in her life. And I think that makes a big impact on me to know that I've helped other people. And here coming out on the blog in the next couple of weeks is actually a dialogue between her and I. So it's preparedness from the perspective of a relatively new prepper and the perspective of a fairly veteran prepper. And how do the two go hand in hand? And what are the areas that we're both at? And it's neat to see how much further along she is sooner in her preparedness journey than I was. Things that took me 10 years, she did in 1 or 2. But I think a lot of that is because she had somebody coming alongside her, helping her every step of the way. And no, I wasn't physically there, but between the book and then the things that are in the workbook that help you work out the things in the book, and then the information on the blog. And I've always told my readers, anybody who's ever written me, I've said, look, I am always here to help. I am always here to answer questions. Take advantage of that. And she did. And it was really cool to get to do that and then to dialogue with her and then to get to see the impact that I've made on her and then hear about the impact that she's made on others.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing and having been in Texas in the areas that were very affected. I can totally appreciate that. I mean, most people were not prepared, especially with water. And they had boil water notices, and people didn't have electricity. They didn't really
Right.
have, a lot of them didn't have water. And I'm thinking,
Right.
how can you boil water if you don't have electricity? I mean, some people did have propane and things like that. But I've actually heard, several stories of people that went through it and they were prepared. And there was a gentleman. I mean, this was a separate interview that I did for a gentleman that designs rocket stoves, but it saved their life. But their neighbor perished because he froze to death. I mean, those kind of things that are real and that happen if you're not prepared. And one of the things that we were talking before the recording is, there are foreseen crises. If you have your eyes open, if you have your ears listening, there are some foreseen crises that we can be preparing for, that we know are inevitable. But there are also unforeseen emergencies. Something could come up but it's kind of like, if you know that emergencies are going to come, then you can take action, and they are not going to be things that take you by surprise completely, because you knew that there are inevitable things that can happen. So, one of the things I'm going to share one of my favorite things that I saw in the book, and I'd love for you to tell me one of your favorite things, or maybe a all across reader favorite. But in chapter 2, you talk about, you briefly touch on the importance of, here it is. It's called, sorry, I didn't mark I thought I could just come right back to it. But the importance of a garden in your long-term food storage plan. And you said that that you need to have a garden for nutritional diversity because of the enzymes, vitamins, and minerals that you won't find in your bucket of long-term food storage. And you share some other tips, but being able to just have that, to just be resilient in thinking, and have the strategy mindset, strategic mindset, that it's not just survival. And one of the things that you mentioned also, and I say all the time, is I see a lot of times people buy like cheap food in bulk to do their preparedness food storage. And I think that the food that you prepare for emergencies should actually be the same or better food, because you're going to be under stress and you're going to need more nutrients, and you're going to need to be in better health. And so right here, I saw that that you mentioned that. So it's a really good thing to do. Now, if you just really have no interest in a garden, there are things you can do, like growing sprouts or sprouting seeds.
Yes.
And that provides you, or even sprouting your beans and legumes. There are many beans and legumes that you can sprout and at least eat
Or
those.
even your wheat berries. Yes,
Right.
your wheat berries. If you've stored those, they're a great thing to sprout.
Yes. So there are so seeds, beans, and legumes you can sprout. And just having that awareness that you can't just eat the cooked food all the time and expect to stay naturally healthy, naturally resilient, and be able to preserve the energy levels that you're going to need, which are going to always be greater. You're going to have greater needs. So you don't base it on right now when things are more stable. You want to plan for a time when things are going to be harder. So you want to, in a way, you want to have it to be simple, but that's what you think now. You prepare now so that later you basically like pay yourself forward. And one of the things that I say to people, to students that we mentor, is that you can save now the trouble and just do nothing and then have to pay later, or you invest now the effort while you have the opportunity to do something about it. Invest now and save later. I personally heard of a story of someone going during the dark winter in Texas. I heard of a story of someone going to the store to buy 2x4s to burn wood in their fire, their stove. I forgot what is that called, Karen? I just blanked out.
A cook stove or a
Um,
fireplace?
the fireplace. That's it. So it's like, if you prepare ahead for, 1, 2, 3 emergencies, let's say, then if you are stuck in your home for a week or two, then you're going to be better off. You have time to find the resources that you need, instead of just, what does the gas station that's a mile down the road from me have available? And what if they run out and the roads are closed and there's no gasoline and all those things? So it's just really important to be very strategic. Plan for the things that are important to you. Health should be important to you. You know, plan for natural health and wellness in your preparedness plan. Include that, because it's going to have greater needs in a time of crisis than you can imagine. So that was one of the things that stuck out to me, and I was grateful for that was stated here. One of our favorite seeds that we sprout is broccoli, because it's so high in sulforaphane. It keeps your mitochondria happy, and it is just a phenomenal, like, you get the most bang for your buck if you're going to sprout a seed, for the nutrition and the benefits that you can get. It's just great. You do need to go ahead and buy seeds in bulk. I will put a link below where we get our seeds in bulk and some other foods in bulk. But just think about the things that you need to have on hand. If and then, even if you prepare a garden, it's going to take time from the time that you put the seed in the ground. But sprouting seeds, just in a few days, you can benefit from that. Having a place to have grow lights in your home is great also, in case you're not able to put it outside, or it's cloudy or rainy or whatever. So these are the things that, if you just can think through, doing nothing to 5 steps ahead and plan for that and have it on hand, it can make such a big difference, like it did for the Texas gal. So Karen, what is a favorite, something that you really are excited that you were able to include in the book, or maybe something that you hear people talk about is one of their favorite
So,
things?
one of the things that I like that I was able to include in here is I teach people how to create a short term food storage menu. Now, that sounds simple, but it can get complicated when you're creating a short term food storage menu. And the reason why is, just like Aurora just said, if you're going to plant a garden, it takes time for those vegetables to grow, usually between a month and a half to 3 months for the different vegetables to grow. So you've got a while between the time you plant and the time you're going to harvest, and you need to be able to feed your family during that time. So I suggest to everybody that they work up to 3 months of having food storage in your house. And that's a short-term food storage. So I walk people through, how do you take everyday recipes that you already use, that your family already loves, and how do you convert them to food storage recipes, so that if there's a crisis and you're not able to go to the grocery store and you have to grow your own food and you haven't already started a garden for the year, what things can you already have on hand to get you through that period of time? So I walk you through how to choose your recipes, because some recipes work great for food storage. One of the things that we're having for dinner tonight, it's called Mexicali pie, and it's one of the food storage recipes that we use constantly. But there's a difference between what makes that a good food storage recipe and why something like meatloaf would not be a good food storage recipe. And I walk you through how to make a decision as to what things are going to work well for food storage, for your long-term food, or for your short-term food storage, and what types of things are not going to work well for short-term food storage. And then I teach you how to make your menu so that it's the most effective for your family. So you're still getting a variety of nutrients, you're still getting a variety of different tastes and flavors. You're eating things that you know your family is going to love. But how do you do that? And how do you scale it out to 3 months? Because you're not going to plan a different meal for every dinner for 3 months. How do you do that? What are the types of things that you need to do in order to make it easier for you? So that's, I think, the thing that I love most about this book is I give you practical steps as far as what you need to do, how you make the decisions. I don't tell you this is the food storage menu you should have. I tell you to actually go ask all of the members of your family what their 5 to 10 favorite meals are that you make. And you start with the meals that your family already loves, and then you're going to go from there. So I think that's my favorite thing that I've included in the book.
That's awesome. So I will, and it's so beneficial to just have someone that's already done it and come up with a simplified way to get it done, right? So you don't have to come up with all the steps and try to reverse engineer. But when you showed me the workbook, you mentioned one of my favorite things that you shared with me about the workbook is the gardening planner. Can you tell us more about that for those people who are considering getting the book and maybe the companion workbook? Tell us about that section in the gardening planner, and you know, not just the planting the garden, but the post garden write up.
Great. So what I have here in the companion workbook, which basically it's all of the worksheets that you need to do, the assignments that I have in A Year Without the Grocery Store. And it breaks it down for you. It's got all of it there for you. You don't have to figure it out yourself. It's done. We start the gardening section with a whole list of different vegetables that you can grow. And I tell you, go find the vegetables that your family already likes to eat. And I list, as you can see, a whole bunch of vegetables on here. Go through and do that. So that's where that section on gardening starts. It's starting with the foods your family likes to eat. Because I guarantee you that even if you grow asparagus just because it's going to come back every year and you don't have to plant it every year, if your family doesn't eat it, it's wasted time and wasted garden space. So that's why we always start with foods that our family already loves. But on the gardening section, that's where we start. And then we go from, okay, those are the foods my family likes, to those are the foods I'm going to grow. And here is a grid to decide what foods I'm going to grow where. So you'll see the grid up here, but then down here, you see a box. Maybe you see a box. There you go. You see the box and you color that a certain color. So maybe if you're growing lettuce, you color that in green, and then next to it, you're going to write lettuce. And then down from there, maybe the next thing you're going to grow is your family likes corn. So you're going to color that yellow, and next to that, you're going to write corn. And then whatever size garden you have, you can use a Sharpie to outline the sizes of your beds in this section. So you can outline the sizes of your beds. You can fill in with the different colors of the different vegetables or fruits that you're going to grow there. And that gives you a way to plan your garden for the following year. But what else Aurora was talking about is every year after you have done your garden, you have harvested your garden, you've gotten it ready to go, then you come back and say, okay, what did I learn about my garden? And these are garden recap forms. So one, it says, I planted, and so I list the fruit, the vegetable, or the herb. The next column says how much I planted or how many, depending on the way it's going to go there. How many I harvested or how much I harvested. So maybe you planted 10 tomato plants, but you only harvested 6 tomatoes. All right, so that could be a problem. Well, that is a problem, but you put that in here because then as we go along, you're going to find out why you need that. So how I preserved these foods. Did I freeze dry it? Did I can it using a water bath canner if it's a tomato product? Did I use a pressure canner to can it? Did I dehydrate it? So how did I preserve this food? Then how many pints or quarts did I get? How many? So I need this many more. So if I didn't have enough, how many more do I need? So I know how much more to plant next year. Or how much did I have left over? So how many less do I need to plant next year? And then what do I need to research to improve? Because if you only got 6 tomatoes and you planted 10 tomato plants, there's an issue. So you need to figure out what you did wrong, how to make it right, and how next year's yield can be even better. So that's the section Aurora is talking about gardening. And it takes you through from what does your family like to where am I going to plant it to how did it go and how can I make it better?
Thank you, Karen, for walking us through that part of the workbook.
Absolutely.
And so, what Karen was saying is at the end of each chapter, so for example, I was mentioning chapter 2 was the one that I referenced at the end. It has some assignments. This one, for example, has 4 assignments that have to do with that, so that you are actually implementing what you learned. Because really, as educators and mentors, we want you to act on what you're learning. That's the most important thing. And time is of the essence right now, right? And so
Yes.
it could mean the difference, like the Texas gal that wrote Karen. It can mean the difference between your family having something to eat or not having something to eat, because maybe you have all the food storage, but you haven't thought ahead as to what water you're going to use or how you're going to go about cooking it. And there are a lot of things we don't think about in this consumeristic world that we live in, where you just turn on, well, it doesn't happen so much in my home, but for most people's homes, you flip a switch. We have to be very conscious of our energy usage and planning, but it wasn't like that. That's not always how I lived. And so, turn on the faucet, the water comes out, or turn on the light and it comes on, or put it on the stove and it just automatically you have gas, or septic, electric, all those things that for many homes are just a given. You start thinking about, oh, what if a natural disaster happened, or what if we lost income for a longer period of time than we had expected, which is a reality that many people are facing right now. How do
Mhm.
you go about becoming more resilient in not just food, but the whole ecosystem of how you put nutrition in your mouth and in your family's mouth? Um, One of the things I kind of was saying that I wanted people to stick around for is Karen shared, and it's amazing, it was 9 months ago, but on the first interview that we did together, Karen shared how they were, we talked about doing what you can where you are. And that's what our story was. We started out when we were living as expats in northern Mexico. We finally started like when we had the least amount of resources, that's when we wanted to start. And that's us. Y'all can go back and watch the first interview. But Karen mentioned how they were doing what they could with the property that they were living at. And I really want Karen to share the testimony of what happened. I want you, Karen, to just share with them what you did do with the property. You had some limitations, and your dreams for expansion, your dreams for what it would look like to move forward, to do better things, bigger and better things. And what happened? Tell us, because you told us there was a possibility that you were going to be moving and that you were going to be getting this dream property. So tell us the story.
You bet. So I think what Aurora is asking me to talk about from before is we lived about 8 miles from where we do now. Um, we lived in a suburban area in central Illinois. We had a quarter of an acre, so we didn't have a ton of space, but we had some. And it's interesting because on that quarter of an acre, we had 3 raised beds. We had 4 apple trees. We had 2 peach trees. We had tried to grow some blackberry and some raspberry bushes. We had an herb garden. We had started work on a water storage system. Um, and all of this was there on that 0.25 acres. Um, we did what we could with the space that we had, and we had plans to continue to expand. But we also knew that we believed that the Lord was calling us to homestead in a more significant way. And so it's interesting because Aurora said the interview was on January 6th, and it was like on January 2nd that we came and looked at the property that we currently own. And we fell in love with it. We thought it was perfect in every way. And don't get me wrong, as far as preparedness properties goes, it is an amazing property. We have about an acre and a third lake. Um, we have fish stocked in that lake, so we could go fishing in it. We can use that for water if we needed to. We have a Morton building, which is a metal like a metal garage slash shed. We have a cattle barn. We have a chicken and goat barn. We have a storage barn. And we have it's called, I call it my potting shed, but it's another little building. It's kind of like a well house that we have. Um, and it's about 5 acres. So there's a lot of potential. It already has 7 apple trees. It already had like 3 or 4 mulberry trees. It has blackberry bushes. So there's a lot going for it. It's got maple trees as well. Matter of fact, we're talking about tapping our maples next spring, next February. So, I mean, there's a lot going for it. It already had a lot of self-sufficient spots that we really wanted to hit. So it scratched that itch. But what's really interesting is on a quarter of an acre, we could keep up with everything a whole lot better. But here, the amount of work that it takes to keep up with a 5 acre property, that it takes to keep up with the buildings, that it takes to keep up with the mowing. We have more apples on the ground than we have processed because there's so many apples on 7 apple trees. We can't keep up with them. We got some mulberries this year. Somehow we missed the blackberries. So it was interesting because when we were on a quarter of an acre property, it was small and we did things with it. But it was much more manageable. So I want to encourage anybody who's watching that there is no perfect preparedness property. There really isn't. And if you're in a small area now, do those things that you can do where you are. We had a garden and we actually had a fairly productive garden. Every year our garden got better. This year we got so much less than we ever got last year in the city last year. And here in the country this year it got mowed over. That's how bad the garden was. Yes, we had 4 apple trees there that were starting to produce. When we moved, we tried to bring them with us and we lost all of our apple trees. We also lost both of our peach trees when we moved, which is really, really sad because we tried to transplant them with us. But we had so much going for us there. Yes, we did what we believe the Lord had wanted us to do. We took that step of faith. But there's so much more here, and we are, even with 3 kids still at home, we've lost 2 kids in the last year. So even with 3 kids still at home, it is so much more for us to keep up with, and it's very difficult. So there are trade-offs, and you need to see that. In our last property, we had a basement, and I had a huge basement that I could keep so much food and so much backstock. We had probably a year's worth of soap. We had a year's worth of shampoo. We had a year's worth of, well, maybe not a year's worth, 6 months worth of laundry detergent, 6 months worth of toilet paper, 6 months worth of dish soap. But now where we moved to, we have no basement. There is no climate controlled storage anywhere except in the house. And while the house technically says it measures the same size as our last house, I guarantee you it either doesn't or it is not as well organized as our last house was, because the last house felt like it had so much more space. So there's always going to be give and takes. We're in the country, so we're further out, which we like. We have a pond, so we have water, we have fish, so we have meat, we have apple trees, so we have fruit. But then there are the downsides to it. It's so much for us to keep up with. It is so much just on a daily and a weekly basis for us to keep going with the property. We have less storage than we've had before. So no matter where you are, there's going to be upsides, there's going to be downsides. So don't just think, well, just because, I can't do as much on this quarter of an acre or third of an acre as I want to in the city, don't necessarily think that isn't the right place for you. You need to ask the Lord where he would have you to be. And 2, if he wants you to be there, you need to maximize the things that you can do in that space, because I guarantee you can do a whole lot more than you think you can. Even in Illinois, with all of the regulations that we have, I found out that you can have guineas, I believe it was, on your property. So you can have meat birds. They do give eggs. They're small, but everywhere in the country, my understanding is, but I know for certain in Illinois, you can have guineas. So you can have some kind of a meat bird. You can have some kind of egg, even there in the suburbs of a state that is highly regulated, and most cities don't let anybody have anything like chickens or ducks or things like that. So find the ways that you can make where you are work for you, and don't always say I have to have more, because you might get more and then you might be like us and think I can't keep up with more. So while we're thankful for where we are, and I'm not going to knock that at all, you know, the other thing that's interesting is, unlike Aurora, who's basically building everything from scratch, we inherited, or we bought, almost a century old farmhouse, and it took us. We put $60,000 almost into this house to get it to where it was closer to where we wanted it to be, and then we found out, okay, our pond is going to take almost $20,000 to repair. We found out that we have all of these other expenses that we didn't realize. So again, we have blessings, and I'm not going to knock those, and I'm thankful for them, but there's also downsides to it. So realize that where you are now may be the best place for you, and don't just try to run ahead for the sake of running ahead. Really take time, ask the Lord what he wants you to do, work through everything, and see, is that the best place for you? Because it might be better to be smaller. It might be better to be in a close knit group of people around you that can help one another. So take those things into consideration before you just jump in and say, I have to have, 3 to 5 acres or more in the country, and I've got all these things I'm going to do with it.
Such good wisdom, Karen. I really appreciate you sharing that. And, you guys, Karen has been so generous to share with us about her journey. Again, I'm going to put a link for you to be able to go back and watch the previous recording that we did. But, if you want to get a copy of her book, we put a link to her blog, and you can find it there. And we also put a link to her page on Amazon that you can follow her as an author. And not only can you find the books that she has written, but you can also get notifications for the books that she is working on. And then when those come out, then you can get that update that they're ready to be purchased, and you can follow Karen's journey there. So we invite you to take a look at the links below and take action, follow her journey, get the book, and do the homework. That's the most important thing. Do the homework and check out her blog. If you do have an amazing story, we do ask that you write Karen and let her know what happened, and also go back to Amazon and share your review with other readers that are considering it. That helps her as an author so much to have the positive feedback, and whatever questions you may have, she's very open to correspond, like she said, with her readers. So, Karen, is there any last thing that you want to share, based on what we talked about today? You dropped so many nuggets of wisdom. As people are considering the idea that they can be a year without the grocery store, and that it is doable if you have the right mentor. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you want to leave our viewers with regarding preparedness, regarding the journey that they're on with getting to that next level, whatever that may be? Is there anything that comes to mind that you want to share?
I would say, remember that it's not just the destination. That you need to enjoy the journey as you're on it, because if you are always harried and you are always running and you are always frustrated, then why do you need to go to the next thing? Why do you need to take your journey to the next level if you're not enjoying it where you are? So don't just look for the destination. Find ways that you can actually enjoy the journey that you're on where you are right now.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Karen. And I do agree. You have to understand that whatever you do get, if you're able to move, you're only going to be able to scale also in the faithfulness and the stewardship level that you were at. So if you were, if you had a small piece of property or land or a backyard or patio or balcony, whatever, and you were just waiting until you had land and you were not faithful to do with what you had, it's going to rob you of being able to flourish in the next place. And I love the wisdom that Karen shared, because it's really important to be planted and to flourish and prosper where you are, and let the Lord uproot you at the right time. And she shared what happened with the trees that they tried to take along, and it wasn't their time. It wasn't maybe the season, or it wasn't the right thing, and they perished. They died. And unfortunately, there are families, there are relationships that perish in trying to get too far, too fast, too soon. So there, like when we're talking about that, there's wisdom and understanding that there are trade-offs. What can you handle? What can your family handle? And it's just really important for you to take inventory of your assets, of what you have, and to make sure that it's the Lord that's uprooting you to the next place, and you don't uproot yourself and cause a part
Right.
of your life to perish that did not have to perish, did not have to be sacrificed. And obedience is better than sacrifice. So that's what
Yes.
I want to leave you with, that you can flourish where you're planted, that you can, I mean, just imagine if Karen and her family had not done anything and they waited, they would have to start from scratch at this 5-acre property, and it would be way more overwhelming for them to know what to prioritize, what they can do, can't do, and also they had to have a trade-off of their garden, which I'm sure is of great value to them. That there are some things in the transition that are lost in the transfer, and you have to wait, and it may take a year or two for them to get caught up, or they may or may not ever grow the same things the same way ever again. But then, they have fish and they have other things. And as far as the storage space, I can totally relate. And so you have to you have to understand, like, how important is that to you, because your sanity will be tested when if you have things in your home that used to be in your basement, and now you have to see them and have to deal with them, and they're in your way. And um, moving is already stressful, and transitioning is already stressful, and building is already stressful, and doing new things, they require a level of a learning curve. And it just, it's like a system overload, that computer's being bogged down. And so uh, if you are, whatever you are doing right now, just see where can you expand and grow and add a little bit more resistance to your muscles, a little bit more um, endurance, so that if you do get the opportunity to be uprooted, then you you have a greater
Yes.
like level of endurance, because you will be tested and it will be hard. And a friend, I actually interviewed my a friend Maverick, that was part of our early years, like 9, 10 years ago, and he was a huge part of our story with getting. We had nothing, we completely off grid, and then we got solar, a small solar system. And he shared with me privately, he said, "We're so happy for you to see your progress." And I said, "Thank you. What didn't kill us is making us stronger," right? But
Yes.
you will feel like you need some Psalm 23 action and some resurrection life, because everything gets tested in the pioneering journey. And if you read stories of pioneers long ago, they lost a lot in their journey. And unfortunately, even though it's a trend now, I mean, it wasn't a trend when we were going off grid and everything. People thought we were had lost had lost our minds. But it was 2011, and that was not the people were not as aware of wanting to do that. We didn't really watch TV or shows, but there really weren't. YouTube wasn't what it is today. There wasn't as much, I guess, coverage about the moves and the things like that. But pioneering is tough, and it takes a really one of the things that I have been sharing is that the best way to prepare ahead is to first learn to prepare inside. The more resilient you are inside, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your creator, your relationship with your inner core, your family, the more capacity you're going to have to make these big leaps, right? And families traveled as pioneers in, in their core circles so that they could stick together and be there no matter what. And you have to have that. We found, there's like these two ditches of either individualism and trying to go for like full independence. And, one of the things I share is that being self-sustainable is, self sufficient is an oxymoron, because you didn't create yourself, you can't advance yourself. You need God, you need other people, you need family. But, just having that understanding that there are two ditches. There's one ditch is individualism and total independence, or the pursuit of that ideal. And the other one is codependence and being too dependent. And so what I think is really important is to be interdependent. And Karen shared, with you, if you have a really strong support system, just weigh carefully and understand that you have something very valuable. And, how can you grow where you are? Because a lot of people have land and they don't have a support system. They don't have people close by. That for sure was our story. We left everything behind and we're several states away from family. And so it's something to think about and to consider and take inventory of. So thank you again, Karen, for coming back and sharing your testimony of provision, of faithfulness, of stewardship, and how that translated into where you are right now and all the progress that you have had in your life, all the progress and basically the fruit that the book has borne in other people's lives. How exciting it is that when we're faithful, we're able to be fruitful and multiply. And that is the calling that we have, to be fruitful and multiplying within our families and to make an impact in the world, to be a lighthouse for the better. And what a better time, we're here for such a time as this. So thank you for shining your light and reflecting his light. And so the way that I like to end all of our broadcast is with a blessing. So may the Lord bless you and keep you, shine his face towards you, be gracious unto you, turn his countenance towards you, and give you shalom, peace.
Amen.